Hello, Mustang family, and welcome back. I'm Mrs. B, and today I'll be reading the chapter Mixing the Dream from BFG. It was now dark. The night had already begun. The BFG with Sophie sitting on his hand hurried to the cave and put on those brilliant, blinding lights that seemed to come from nowhere. He placed Sophie on the table. "Stay there," he said, and no chattering. I's need to listen only to silence when I's mixing up such a nigh-deplexicated dream as this. He hurried away from her. He got out an enormous empty glass jar that was the size of a washing machine. He clutched it to his chest and hurried towards the shelf on which stood thousands and thousands of smaller jars containing the captured dreams. "Dream about giants," he muttered to himself as he searched the label. "The giants is guzzling human beings. No, not one, nor that one. Here is one, and here's another." He grabbed the jars and unscrewed the tops. He tipped the dreams into the enormous jar that he was clutching, and as each one went in, Sophie caught a glimpse of a small green blob tumbling from one jar into the other. The BFG hurried towards another shelf. "Now," he muttered, "I is wanting dreams about giggly houses for girls and about boggly boxes for boys." He was becoming very tense now. Sophie could see the excitement bubbling inside him as he scurried back and forth. Among the beloved jars, there must have been 50,000 dreams altogether up there on the shelf. But he seemed to know almost exactly where every one of them was. "Dreams about little girls," he muttered, "and dreams about me, about the BFG. Come on, hurry up, get with it. Now where are in the wonky world is I keeping those?" And so I went on. In about a half an hour, the BFG had found all the dreams he wanted and had tipped them into one huge jar. He put the jar on the table. Sophie sat watching him, but said nothing. Inside the big jar, lying on the bottom of it, she could clearly see about 50 of those oval green jellyfish shapes, all pulsing gently in and out, some laying on top of others, but each one still a quite separate individual dream. "Now we is mixing them," the BFG announced. He went into the cupboard where he kept a bottle of his fabricated, and from one it took out a gigantic egg beater. It was one of those that has handles which you turn down below, and there are lots of overlapping blades that go whistling around. He inserted the bottom of this contraption into the big jar where the dreams were lying. "Watch," he said. He started turning the handle very fast. Flashes of green and blue exploded inside the jar. The dreams were being whisked into a sea green fourth. "The poor things," Sophie cried. "They is not feeling it," the BFG said, and he turned the handle. "Dreams is not like human beings or animals. They has no brains. They's is made of zombies." After about a minute, the BFG stopped whisking. The whole bottle was now full to the brim with large bubbles. They were almost exactly like the bubbles we ourselves blow from soapy water, except these had even brighter and more beautiful cormlets swimming on their surface. "Keep watching," the BFG said quite slowly. The topmost bubbles rose through the neck of the jar and floated away. A second one followed, then a third and a fourth, and the cave was filled with hundreds of beautiful colored bubbles and drifted gently through the air. It was truly a wonderful sight. As Sophie watched them, they all started floating towards the cave entrance. which was still open. They're going out, Sophie whispered. Of course, the BFG said. Where to? These little tiny dream bits that I ain't using, the BFG said. They going back to the misty country to join up the proper dreams. It's all a bit beyond me, Sophie said. Dreams is full of mysteries and magic, the BFG said. Do not try to understand them. Look in the big bottle, and you will now see the dream you was waiting for, Queen. Sophie turned and stared into the great jar. On the bottom of it, something was thrashing around wildly, bouncing up and down and flinging itself against the walls of the jar. Good heavens, she cried. Is that it? That's it, the BFG said proudly. But it's horrible, Sophie cried. It's jumping about. I want to get out. That's because it's a truggle humper, the BFG said. It's a nightmare. Oh, but I don't want to give you the queen a nightmare, Sophie cried. If she is dreaming about giants guzzling up the little boys and girls, then what is you expecting to be expected? A nightmare? The BFG said. Oh no, Sophie cried. Oh yes, the BFG said. A dream where you is seeing little chitters being eaten is about to be the most frightsome, trungler humping dream you can get. It's a Kaiser bugger thumper, a once-per glubber switcher. It is all of them riddled into one. It is bad as the dream I blew into the flesh hump eater this afternoon. It is worse. Sophie stared down at the fearful nightmare dream that was still thrashing away in the huge glass jar. It was much larger than the other. It was about the size and shape of, shall we say, a turkey egg. It was jellyish. It had tinkles of bright scarlets deep inside. There was something terrible about the way it was throwing itself against the side of the jar. I don't want to give the queen a nightmare, Sophie said. I was thinking, the BFG said, that your queen will be happy to have a nightmare if having a nightmare is going to save a lot of human beings from being gobbled up by the fleshsome giant. Is I right or is I left? I suppose you're right, Sophie said. I got to be done. She would soon be getting over it, the BFG said. You had to put all the other important things into it, Sophie asked. When I was blowing that dream into the queen's bedroom, the BFG said, she would be dreaming every single little thing-a-langin'. You is asking me to make her dream about me sitting on the windowsill. That part is very strong. And about a big friendly giant. I putting in that nice long gobble about him, the BFG said. As she spoke, he picked up one of the smaller jars and very quickly tipped it. The struggling, thrashing throggle humper out of the large jar into a small one. Then he screwed the lid tightly onto the small jar. That's it, he announced. We is now ready. He fletched his suitcase and put the small jar into it. Why bother to take a great big suitcase when you've only got one jar, Sophie said. You can put the jar in your pocket. The BFG looked down at her and smiled. By gugglers, he said, taking one of the jars out of a suitcase, your head is not quite so full of Jimmy's laws after all. I can see you was not born last week. Thank you, kind sir, Sophie said, making a little curtsy from the top table. You is ready to leave? The BFG asked. I'm ready, Sophie cried. Her heart is beginning to thump at the thought of what they were about to do. It was a wild and crazy thing. Perhaps they would both be thrown into prison. The BFG was putting on his great black cloak. He tucked the drawer into a pocket in his cloak. He packed up the long, trumpet-like dream blower. Then he turned and looked at Sophie, who was still on the tabletop. "The dream bottle is in my pocket," he said. "Is you going to sit there with it during the travel?" "Never," cried Sophie. "I refuse to sit to that beastly thing." "Then where is you going to sit?" the BFG asked her. Sophie looked over for a few moments. Then she said, "If you want to be kind enough to swivel one of those up your lovely ears so that it is lying flat like a dish, that would make me very costly place for me to sit." "By gumbo, that is squack-a-lacking a good idea," the BFG said slowly. He swiveled his huge right ear until it was like a great shell facing the heavens. He lifted Sophie up and placed her into it. The ear itself, which was about the size of a large tea tray, was full of the same channels and cracklings as a human ear. It was extremely comfortable. "I hope I don't fall down in your ear hole," Sophie said, edging away from the large hole just beside her. "Be very careful not to do that," the BFG said. "You will be giving me chronicle earaches." "The nice thing about being there is that she should," whisper directly into his ear. "You's a tickling me a bit," the BFG said. "Please do not juggle about." "I'll try not to," Sophie said. "Are we ready?" "Ooh!" yelled the BFG. "Don't do that." "I didn't do anything," Sophie said. "You was talking too loud. You was forgetting that I is hearing every little thing-a-lacking 50 times louder than usual. And there you is shouting away right inside my ear." "Oh gosh," Sophie murmured. "I forgot that. Your voice is sounding like thunder and trumpets." "I'm sorry," Sophie whispered. "Is that better?" "No," cried the BFG. "It sounds as though as you was shooting off Bunderbliss. Then now, can I talk to you?" Sophie whispered. "Don't," cried the poor BFG. "Please don't. Each word is like you dropping biz bombs in my ear hole." Sophie tried speaking right under her breath. "Is this better?" he said. She spoke very softly. She could even hear her own voice. "That's better," the BFG said. "Now as I hearing you very nicely. What is it you trying to say to me just now?" "I was saying, are we ready?" "We is off," cried the BFG, heading for the cave entrance. "We is off to meet Mr. Magister the Queen." Outside the cave, he rolled the large rolled stone back into place and set off a tremendous gallop. Stay tuned to see who reads the next chapter. Bye.